6. My son's wife pawned my ugly brooch for $200. The pawn shop owner called FBI for a $6 million artifact. I was standing in the middle of my grandson's christening reception when my phone buzzed. The number came up as Federal Bureau of Investigation, Art Crimes Division. I excused myself from the buffet line, stepped into the church courtyard, and answered. The agent on the other end said, "Mrs. Kowalski, we need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't alert anyone. We're 5 minutes out." I looked back through the glass doors at the reception hall. White tablecloths, pale pink balloons, my daughter-in-law Christina laughing with her sister near the punch bowl, my son Daniel holding baby Ethan, everyone oblivious. And I knew exactly what this was about. Before I tell you how I ended up with federal agents converging on a church basement in suburban Milwaukee, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what happened next changed everything. And I want to know this story reaches people who understand what it means to be underestimated. Let me take you back to how we got here. 14 months earlier, September 2024, I'm Dorothy Kowalski. I'm 68 years old, born and raised in Milwaukee's Polish South Side. My late husband Stan and I ran a small upholstery business for 42 years, Kowalski and Son, though the son part never quite materialized the way we'd hoped. Stan passed in 2019, heart attack, sudden and cruel. I kept the business going another 3 years before my arthritis made the detail work impossible. Sold it to a young couple from Bayview for enough to keep me comfortable, not wealthy. I live in the same bungalow Stan and I bought in 1981, mortgage paid off, garden in back, good neighbors who still know each other's names. My son Daniel is my only child. He's 39 now, works in medical device sales, does well for himself. Good-looking kid, takes after Stan with those broad shoulders and that earnest face that makes people trust him. Maybe trust him too much. He married Christina Voss 3 years ago, spring of 2022, and I'll be honest with you, I had reservations from the start. Christina came from money. Not old money, but new money that acts like old money. Her father made a fortune in commercial real estate development, those ugly strip malls that keep popping up where family businesses used to be. She grew up in Whitefish Bay, went to Marquette, did a year abroad in Italy that she mentioned approximately every 15 minutes. She was beautiful in that high-maintenance way. Salon highlights every 6 weeks, those eyelash extensions, nails like lacquered weapons. 28 when she married Daniel, and she looked at our family like we were a fixer-upper property with good bones but questionable plumbing. The wedding was at the Pfister Hotel downtown. Black tie, over 200 guests. I wore my best dress. Navy, blue, perfectly appropriate. And Christina's mother, Judith, looked me up and down like I'd shown up in gardening clothes. During the reception, I was seated at table 17, so far from the head table I needed binoculars to see my own son. Christina's college roommates were at table 3, but I smiled. I congratulated them. I wrote a check for $5,000, a quarter of what I'd gotten from selling the business, because that's what you do. You support your children's choices even when your gut tells you those choices are going to cost them. The first year of their marriage, I barely saw Daniel. Christina always had plans. Couples trips to Door County with her friends, wine tastings, charity galas for causes she'd just discovered. When they did invite me over to their new condo in the 3rd Ward, Christina would do this thing where she'd compliment something I was wearing in a voice dripping with surprise. "Oh, Dorothy, what an interesting sweater. So folksy." Or she'd ask about my late husband's family with this anthropological curiosity, like we were subjects in a documentary about ethnic Milwaukee. I bit my tongue. Stan always said I had a talent for biting my tongue so hard, I should have bled out years ago. Then Christina got pregnant. Summer of 2023. And suddenly I was useful again. Suddenly she needed my babysitting services lined up, my schedule cleared, my willingness to be on call confirmed. Daniel was sheepish about it. "Mum, I know it's a lot to ask, but Christina really wants to keep working and daycare costs are insane." And I said yes, because this was my grandchild. My first grandchild. Possibly my only grandchild. Ethan was born March 2024, 7 pounds, 6 ounces, perfect. I was in love immediately. They brought him home to that sterile condo with the white furniture and the abstract art Christina's decorator had chosen, and I started coming over 3 days a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'd arrive at 8 in the morning, and Christina would hand over the baby like she was relieving a shift worker, then disappear to her Pilates class, or her volunteer board meeting, or her lunch with the girls. I didn't mind. Those hours with Ethan were the sweetest thing I'd experienced since Stan died. I'd hold him in the rocking chair Stan had built when Daniel was born, the one piece of furniture Christina had reluctantly accepted into her showcase home, and I'd sing the same Polish lullabies my grandmother sang to me. Ethan would grip my finger with his tiny hand, and the world would shrink down to just the two of us. But Christina had rules. So many rules. The baby could only sleep in the designer crib, not in my arms. He had to nap at exactly these times. Only organic purees, only specific brands. I couldn't take him outside without texting her first. I couldn't post any photos on Facebook without her approval, and when I did get approval, she'd critique the lighting or the angle. "Dorothy, this makes him look jaundiced. Please delete it." I followed her rules. Every single one, because I knew my access to Ethan was conditional on my compliance. Daniel worked long hours, traveling to hospitals across the Midwest. He'd come home exhausted, and Christina would hand him a list of things that needed fixing or organizing, then retreat to their bedroom with her phone. I watched my son become a ghost in his own home, but I said nothing. What could I say? He'd made his choice. She was the mother of his child. You don't interfere in your adult son's marriage, no matter how much you want to shake him and ask when he'd stopped recognizing himself in the mirror. Then came the incident with the brooch. It was late June, a Saturday morning. I'd come over for my babysitting shift. Christina was getting ready for some charity luncheon, the Children's Hospital Foundation, I think, and she was in a panic because her usual necklace didn't match her dress. I was in the living room with Ethan when she came storming out of the bedroom, holding up a blue cocktail dress. "Dorothy, do you have any jewelry I could borrow? Something vintage? The theme is old Hollywood glamour, and everything I own is too modern." I hesitated. I didn't wear much jewelry, my wedding ring, a simple chain with a cross, small pearl earrings for church. But there was one piece. One piece I'd kept in my safety deposit box since Stan's mother passed in 2015. "I have something," I said carefully, "but it's very special to me. It was my mother-in-law's." Christina's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Can you bring it next time?" I should have said no. Every instinct told me to say no. But she was smiling at me, really smiling, for maybe the first time since the wedding. And I thought, foolishly, so foolishly, that maybe this could be a bridge between us, a gesture of trust. "I'll bring it Tuesday," I said. That Tuesday, I stopped by the bank before heading to their condo. I took the brooch from the safety deposit box, held it in my palm, remembered Stan's mother pinning it to her Sunday coat. It wasn't much to look at, honestly. A chunky piece, about 3 inches across, dark metal with a greenish patina, set with small stones that looked like cloudy glass. The design was strange, geometric, but also organic, like something between Art Deco and medieval. Stan's mother had always called it her lucky piece, said it had been in the family for generations, brought over from Poland. I'd had it appraised once, years ago, when we were doing estate planning. The jeweller had glanced at it, said it was probably brass and paste, worth maybe $50 for the vintage appeal. I'd put it away and forgotten about it. I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and brought it to Christina's. She was in the kitchen, looking harried. Ethan had been fussy all morning. She barely looked up when I handed her the small box. "Thanks, Dorothy. I'll get it back to you." She didn't try it on. Didn't ask about its history. Just set it on the counter and went back to typing on her phone. I should have taken it back right then. Should have said, "Actually, you know what? Why don't I hold on to this?" But I was already late getting Ethan ready for his morning routine, and Christina was clearly stressed, and I told myself it would be fine. She'd wear it once, return it, everything would be fine. 3 weeks went by. I didn't see the brooch again. When I finally asked about it, casually, didn't want to seem pushy, Christina waved her hand vaguely. "Oh, I forgot to wear it. That luncheon was so boring. I think it's in my jewelry box. I'll look for it." Another week passed. I asked again. "Christina, honey, I'd really like to get that brooch back. It has sentimental value." She looked annoyed. "Dorothy, I said I'll find it. I have a lot going on right now." I felt the first prickle of real worry. But what could I do? Demand to search her bedroom? Accuse her of being careless with my property? So I waited. And then one morning in late August, I arrived for my Saturday shift, and the door was answered by Christina's sister, Amber. She was 25, lived in Chicago, worked in social media marketing, which, as far as I could tell, meant posting pictures of her brunch. "Oh, hey, Dorothy," Amber said, bouncing Ethan on her hip. "Christina had to run out. Emergency hair appointment. She said you'd watch him." Emergency hair appointment. Right. I took Ethan, and Amber left 20 minutes later, off to meet friends in Bayview. I was alone in the condo with the baby. I shouldn't have done what I did next. I knew it was wrong, even as I was doing it. But I'd been asking about that brooch for a month, and Christina kept brushing me off. And something in her voice when I'd last brought it up had sounded evasive. After I put Ethan down for his nap, I went into the master bedroom. My heart was pounding like I was robbing a bank. I opened Christina's jewelry box, a huge, elaborate thing with multiple drawers, velvet dividers, enough necklaces and bracelets to stock a boutique. The brooch wasn't there. I checked every drawer. Nothing. I looked through her dresser drawers, feeling sicker with each passing minute. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed a shopping bag from Nordstrom sitting on the floor of her walk-in closet. I glanced inside. New shoes, tags still on, $400. Next to it was a smaller bag from some boutique I didn't recognize. Inside were receipts. Lots of receipts. And then I saw it. A receipt from a place called Midtown Pawn and Jewelry, dated 3 weeks earlier. The item description was vague. Vintage brooch, costume jewelry, brass and glass. The amount, $200. She'd pawned it. Christina had pawned my mother-in-law's brooch for $200. I stood there in her closet, receipt in my shaking hand, and felt something in my chest crack open. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but a deep, nauseating understanding of how little she respected me, how little my history, my family, my trust meant to her. I was the babysitter, the help. My things were resources to be liquidated when she needed quick cash for another pair of shoes. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. When Ethan woke up, I fed him, played with him, sang to him. When Christina came home 3 hours later with her freshly highlighted hair, I smiled and asked how her appointment went. I didn't mention the brooch, not that day, because I needed to think. I needed to figure out what I was going to do. That night, I called the pawn shop. A man answered, voice rough but not unkind. I explained that I believed an item of mine had been brought into his shop, a vintage brooch sold by a young woman about 3 weeks ago. There was a pause. Then he said, "Yeah, I remember that piece. Unusual thing. Lady said it was her husband's grandmother's, wanted quick cash. I gave her 200. "I'm the actual owner," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It was taken without my permission. What do I need to do to get it back?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mum, I need to be straight with you. That brooch isn't here anymore." My stomach dropped. "You sold it already?" "No," he said slowly. "No, I didn't sell it. After the lady left, I got curious. That piece had some weight to it, and the metalwork was strange. So I showed it to a buddy of mine who deals in estate jewelry, real high-end stuff. He took one look and told me to call an expert at the Art Institute." I didn't understand. "The Art Institute?" "Mum, I'm going to give you a number. You need to call it tomorrow. Ask for Dr. Leonard Shue. He's going to want to talk to you." "And Mum?" His voice got quieter. "Don't mention this to anyone else yet. Trust me on that." He gave me the number. I wrote it down with a hand that had started trembling. When I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the phone, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. The next morning, Sunday, I called the number, got an answering service, left a message. Dr. Shue called me back within an hour. "Mrs. Kowalski, thank you for reaching out. I understand you're the original owner of a brooch that was recently brought to Midtown Pawn?" "Yes," I said. "My daughter-in-law pawned it without my permission. The shop owner said you'd seen it?" "Mrs. Kowalski, I need to ask you some questions about how you acquired this piece. Please, take your time and be as detailed as you can." For the next 40 minutes, I told him everything. How it had come from my husband's mother, Janina Kowalski. How she'd always said it was a family heirloom from Poland, brought over by her mother in the 1920s. How I'd kept it in my safety deposit box, only taking it out for special occasions. How I'd loaned it to Christina and then discovered she'd pawned it. Dr. Shue listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Mrs. Kowalski, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. Can you do that? And please bring any documentation you have about your mother-in-law's family history, immigration records, photographs, anything." "Can you tell me what this is about?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Tomorrow," he said gently. "In person. I promise I'll explain everything." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Janina, Stan's mother, how she'd come to America as a child, how she'd never talked much about the old country except to say her family had lost everything during the war, how she'd clutched that brooch like a lifeline whenever she was nervous or scared. Monday morning, I drove downtown to the Art Institute. Dr. Shue's office was in a section I'd never seen before, behind the public galleries, all concrete hallways and serious security. He was a small man, probably 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and gentle eyes. He shook my hand and led me into a room where the brooch sat on a white cloth under bright lights. Except it didn't look like my brooch anymore. They'd cleaned it. The greenish patina was gone, revealing gold underneath. bright, rich gold. And the stones, what I'd thought were cloudy glass, caught the light like they were made of fire. "Mrs. Kowalski," Dr. Shu said quietly, "please sit down." I sat. I couldn't stop staring at the brooch. "What you've been keeping in your safety deposit box," he said, "is not costume jewelry. It's a 15th century Polish ceremonial brooch, possibly commissioned by the royal court in Krakow. The metalwork is consistent with pieces produced during the Jagiellonian dynasty. The stones are rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. And based on the design and the hallmarks we've found, we believe this piece may have been part of a larger treasure that disappeared during World War II." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "That's impossible," I whispered. "The jeweler said it was brass. He said it was worth $50. The jeweler was wrong, or didn't look closely. The patina obscured the gold. The setting is extremely unusual. It was designed to look less valuable, possibly to protect it during transport. Mrs. Kowalski, have you ever heard the term spoils of war?" I shook my head. My ears were ringing. During the Nazi occupation of Poland, thousands of cultural artifacts were stolen. Art, jewels, religious objects. Some were recovered after the war. Many were not. There are international databases of missing cultural property, and this morning I cross-referenced this piece with several of them. I believe your brooch matches a description from a cache that disappeared from the Wawel Castle treasury in 1939. But how? I couldn't form full sentences. How would Stan's mother have it? That's what we need to find out. Did she ever mention how her family acquired it? She just said it was passed down, that her mother gave it to her before they left Poland. Dr. Shu leaned forward. "Mrs. Kowalski, I need to bring in some colleagues, federal colleagues, because if this piece is what I think it is, it doesn't legally belong to you or to your family. It belongs to the Polish government. It's a national treasure that's been missing for over 80 years. I felt like I was underwater. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this brooch is worth approximately $6 million, and the FBI Art Crimes Unit is going to want to know how it ended up in Milwaukee." The next 3 weeks were a blur. Federal agents came to my house, polite, professional, but very thorough. They interviewed me for hours. They took every scrap of documentation I had about Janina's family. They found immigration records from 1928, Janina's mother, Zofia, arriving at Ellis Island with a 7-year-old daughter and a single suitcase. The agents were particularly interested in a photograph I'd found in an old album. Zofia as a young woman in Poland, wearing an elaborate dress, standing in front of a grand building. One agent pointed to her collar. "Is that the brooch?" I squinted. It was. Pinned to her high lace collar, unmistakable even in the faded photograph. "We'll need to take this," the agent said. They contacted the Polish government. Historians, museum curators, international lawyers. Everyone agreed. The brooch was stolen property, taken during the Nazi occupation. But the story of how Zofia came to have it was murky. Had she stolen it herself? Had someone given it to her for safekeeping? Had she bought it on the black market? Zofia died in 1974. Janina died in 2015. There was no one left to ask. The federal investigators told me the brooch would be returned to Poland. There would be no criminal charges against me. I'd possessed it in good faith, not knowing its true value or history. But I wouldn't be getting it back. And I certainly wouldn't be seeing any of that $6 million. I told Daniel everything. Had to. The FBI wanted to interview him too, establish the chain of custody. He was stunned, kept asking me to repeat the story like he couldn't process it. But I didn't tell him about Christina pawning it. Not yet. Because I was starting to formulate a plan. I called the pawn shop owner, whose name I'd learned was Ray Kowalczyk, another Polish Southsider. I told him what the brooch turned out to be. There was a long silence. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, he finally said. I had $6 million sitting in my back room. Ray, I need a favor. A big one. Name it. I need you to tell me everything about the day Christina brought that brooch in. Everything she said, how she acted, all of it. He did. And I recorded the call, with his permission. Then I made another call, this one to a lawyer friend from church, Helen Grabowski. Helen had done estate planning, for Stan and me years ago, but before that, she'd worked as a prosecutor. I told her the whole story, not just about the brooch, but about Christina, the pawning, the lies, the pattern of disrespect. Dorothy, Helen said slowly, what exactly are you asking me? I want to know if what Christina did was a crime. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then, she pawned your property without permission. That's theft. The value of the property, even if she didn't know its true worth, was over $600 based on what the pawn shop gave her, and the actual value was $6 million. That's a felony in Wisconsin. You could file charges. Would they prosecute? Given the dollar amount and the federal interest in the case? Oh yes. The DA's office would jump on this, especially since there's a paper trail, the pawn receipt, her signature on the paperwork. What would happen to her? Worst case, prison time. More likely, probation, restitution, community service, and a felony record. I thanked Helen and hung up. Then I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Stan and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 38 years, and I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be. I could file charges, watch Christina be arrested, prosecuted, humiliated, watch my son's marriage implode, watch Ethan grow up with a mother who had a criminal record, or worse, grow up in a broken home. Or I could let it go, accept that she was careless and entitled but not malicious, accept the loss of the brooch, let the FBI do their thing, move on. But then I thought about Christina's face when she'd brush off my questions about the brooch, the casual dismissal, the way she'd handed me Ethan like I was furniture, the way she'd seated me at table 17, and I thought about the precedent I'd be setting for my grandson. What would Ethan learn if he grew up watching his grandmother be treated like a servant? What would he learn about respect, about family, about consequences? I made my decision. I called Helen back. I want to talk to the district attorney's office, but I don't want to file charges yet. I want to hold that option. Can we do that? You want leverage. I want Christina to understand exactly what she did, and I want my son to see who he married. Helen made the calls. Within a week, I had a meeting scheduled with an assistant district attorney named Monica Park. I brought Helen with me. We laid out everything: the brooch, the pawning, the lies, the FBI investigation. Monica took notes, asked pointed questions, and finally said, Mrs. Kowalski, we would absolutely prosecute this if you wanted to press charges, but I understand you're not ready to do that yet. I want her to know she could be charged, I said. I want that conversation to happen in front of my son, and then I want her to make a choice about how she's going to treat me going forward. Monica nodded slowly. That's reasonable. We can have a detective contact her, request a voluntary interview, explain the potential charges. No arrest, no public record yet. Just a very serious conversation about the consequences of her actions. When? How about at a time and place of your choosing? I smiled. I know exactly when and where. Christina and Daniel had announced in September that they'd be having Ethan baptized in October. Big celebration, Christina's family church in Whitefish Bay. Reception to follow in the church hall. Invitations had gone out. Christina's mother was planning the menu. It was going to be another showcase event, another opportunity for the Voss family to demonstrate their superiority. I told Monica. The christening reception, October 19th, 2 p.m. She raised an eyebrow. You want to do this at your grandson's baptism? I want to do it somewhere public, where Christina can't scream or throw things, where she has to control herself, where there are witnesses, and I want my son to see all of it. Mrs. Kowalski, Monica said, and there was something like admiration in her voice. You're tougher than you look. I've been biting my tongue for 3 years, I said. I'm done. The next month was strange. I went about my normal routine, babysitting Ethan, tending my garden, having coffee with my church friends. But I was also preparing. The FBI concluded their investigation and confirmed the brooch would be returned to Poland in a formal ceremony in November. They asked if I'd attend. I said yes. Christina never mentioned the brooch again. Not once. I think she'd hoped I'd simply forgotten about it, written it off as lost somewhere in her condo. Daniel asked me once if I was okay. You seem different, Mum. Distracted. I'm fine, honey, I told him. Just thinking about Ethan's big day. It's going to be quite an event. The morning of October 19th was cold and bright, one of those perfect autumn days where the leaves are gold and red and the sky is impossibly blue. I dressed carefully. My best suit, navy blue with a silk blouse, the pearls Stan gave me on our 20th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who had survived 42 years of hard work, 5 years of widowhood, and 3 years of condescension. I looked like someone who knew her worth. The baptism itself was beautiful. Ethan wore the same christening gown Daniel had worn in 1985, the one my mother had made by hand. Christina had tried to insist on a new designer gown, but for once Daniel had put his foot down. He's wearing the family gown, Chris. It's tradition. I sat in the 3rd row. Not the front. That was reserved for Christina's parents and siblings. But not the back either. I held Ethan during the ceremony when the priest anointed him. His little hand grabbed my finger, and I whispered in Polish, Kocham cię, mój mały. Your great-great-grandmother would have loved you. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the church hall for the reception. Christina had gone all out. White tablecloths, floral centerpieces, a catered buffet, a dessert table with a custom cake. There must have been 80 people there. Christina's family, her friends, some of Daniel's colleagues, a few neighbors. I saw Helen Grabowski arrive and give me a subtle nod. I was standing by the buffet, pretending to consider the salad options, when my phone buzzed. The text was from Monica Park. Detective Sullivan and I are outside. Are you ready? I looked across the room. Christina was holding court near the cake table, laughing with her college friends, her mother hovering nearby like a proud peacock. Daniel was by the windows with Ethan, pointing out the trees to his son. I texted back, Give me 5 minutes. I'll meet you at the door. I walked over to Daniel. Honey, can I talk to you for a second? Outside? He looked surprised, but followed me into the hallway. I led him to a quiet corner near the church entrance. Mum, what's wrong? You look... Daniel, I need you to listen to me very carefully. In a minute, 2 people are going to come in here, a detective and a prosecutor. They're here to talk to Christina. His face went white. What? Why? 3 months ago, I loaned Christina my mother-in-law's brooch. Do you remember? The one Grandma Janina always wore to church? Vaguely, I guess. Christina pawned it, Daniel. She took it to a pawn shop and sold it for $200. Without asking me, without telling me. And then she lied about it when I asked for it back. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. There has to be a mistake. Christina wouldn't. There's no mistake. I have the receipt. I have the pawn shop owner's testimony. And Daniel, there's more. That brooch, it wasn't costume jewelry. It was a 15th century Polish royal piece worth $6 million. The FBI has been investigating for weeks. It's going back to Poland. He looked like I'd hit him with a bat. 6 million. That's impossible. It's very possible. And very real. And what your wife did, pawning my property without permission, is theft, a felony. She could be criminally charged. Oh my God. He leaned against the wall. Does she know? Not yet. The detective is going to tell her in a few minutes, in front of everyone. And Daniel, you need to watch. You need to see how she reacts. You need to understand who you married. Mum, you can't do this. Not here, not today. Yes, here. Yes, today. Because this is the only place where she can't run, can't hide, can't make excuses. She did this, Daniel. She stole from your mother and lied about it. And you've been so busy trying to keep her happy that you haven't noticed she treats me like garbage. Tears were running down his face. I notice, he whispered. I notice all of it. I just didn't know how to. I didn't want you to worry. I cupped his face in my hands. Baby, I'm your mother. Worrying about you is my job. Now come on, it's time. I texted Monica. We're ready. 30 seconds later, the door opened and 2 people walked in. Detective Sullivan was a tall woman in her 40s, wearing a badge on her belt. Monica Park was in a sharp blazer, carrying a folder. We walked into the reception hall together. Conversations didn't stop immediately. People were too absorbed in their food and small talk. But a few heads turned, curious about the strangers. I walked straight to Christina. She was mid-sentence, telling some story about Ethan's pediatrician, when she noticed me approaching with 2 serious-looking women and Daniel trailing behind, ashen-faced. Dorothy? What's... Christina, I said quietly. This is Detective Sullivan from the Milwaukee Police Department and Assistant District Attorney Monica Park. They need to speak with you. The color drained from her face. Around us, conversations were stopping like dominoes falling. People were turning to stare. I don't understand, Christina said, but her voice was shaking. Detective Sullivan stepped forward. Mrs. Kowalski, we need to discuss an item that was pawned at Midtown Pawn and Jewelry on August 23rd. A vintage brooch. You signed the paperwork? Do you remember that transaction? Christina's eyes darted to me, to Daniel, back to the detective. That was a mistake. I was going to get it back. You pawned property that didn't belong to you, Monica Park said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Property valued at over $6 million. Property that was part of a federal investigation into stolen cultural artifacts from World War II. You sold it for $200 and lied to the owner about its whereabouts for 3 months. The room was dead silent now. Everyone was staring. Christina's mother pushed through the crowd, face furious. What is the meaning of this? This is a baptism. You can't just barge in here and... Mrs. Voss, Detective Sullivan said calmly, your daughter committed theft. We're giving her the courtesy of explaining the situation privately before deciding whether to file charges. Would you like us to do this at the police station instead? Judith Voss's mouth snapped shut. Christina was shaking. I didn't know it was valuable. Dorothy said I could borrow it. Borrow, I said, and my voice was steady as stone. Not sell, not pawn, borrow. I needed money, Christina said, and now she was crying, makeup running. I needed money, and you're always so cheap. You never offer to help with anything. You just sit there judging me. You live in a condo that costs $4,000 a month, I said. You drive a car worth $60,000. You have a closet full of designer clothes. And you needed money so badly you stole from your husband's mother? Daniel was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Chris, what did you need money for? She didn't answer, just kept crying. Detective Sullivan opened her notebook. Mrs. Kowalski, Christina, you pawned the brooch on August 23rd. I have credit card records showing that the same day you spent $300 at a salon, $500 at Nordstrom, and $200 at a restaurant. That's $1,000 in a single day. The day you sold your mother-in-law's property for $200. It was just sitting in her house, Christina screamed. And there it was, the real her, the entitled rage she'd been hiding under that pretty face. She didn't even wear it. She didn't need it. It wasn't yours to decide what I needed, I said. And you know what the worst part is, Christina? If you'd just told me the truth, if you'd said you'd made a mistake, if you'd apologized and tried to make it right, we could have moved past this. But you didn't. You lied. You brushed me off. You treated me like I was too stupid to notice or too weak to do anything about it. Daniel turned to his wife. Where's the money now, Chris? She didn't answer. Christina, he said again, voice harder. Where's the $200? I don't know, she sobbed. I spent it. It's gone. Monica Park stepped forward. Mrs. Kowalski, here's what's going to happen. You're not under arrest. Yet. But I want you to understand how serious this is. Theft of property over $10,000 is a Class G felony in Wisconsin. The fact that this property was actually worth $6 million and was part of an international cultural theft makes it even more serious. If we charge you, you're looking at up to 10 years in prison. Christina's knees buckled. Her mother caught her. However, Monica continued, Mrs. Dorothy Kowalski has indicated she's willing to consider not pressing charges if certain conditions are met. Mrs. Kowalski, would you like to explain? All eyes turned to me. I looked at Christina, this woman who'd treated me like an obstacle, who'd used me for babysitting and then discarded my property like trash. I want 3 things, I said. First, a written apology. Not some generic, sorry you feel that way garbage. A real apology acknowledging what you did and why it was wrong. Second, you will repay the $200 you got from the pawn shop, plus an additional $3,000 in restitution to be paid over the next 12 months. I don't want your family's money. I want you to earn it, save it, sacrifice for it, so you understand what it means to take something that doesn't belong to you. Christina was staring at me, mouth open. And third, I said, you will go to counseling, both of you. I looked at Daniel. Marriage counseling, because this isn't just about a brooch. This is about respect, honesty, and partnership. And if you can't figure out how to be partners, if you can't learn to value each other and the people who love you, then Ethan is going to grow up in a broken home, no matter what you do. Daniel was crying openly now. Mum, I'm not done, I said gently. Christina, if you meet these conditions, the apology, the restitution, the counseling, I will not press charges. You won't have a criminal record. You can move on with your life. But if you refuse, or if you half-ass it, or if I find out you're mistreating my son or my grandson, I will go to the DA's office and I will file charges myself. Do you understand? She nodded, still crying. Say it, I said, out loud. I understand, Christina whispered, louder. I understand, she said, voice breaking. Monica handed her a business card. You have 72 hours to contact my office with your decision. If we don't hear from you, we'll proceed with charges. Are we clear? Christina nodded again. Her mother was glaring at me like I'd personally destroyed Western civilization, but Judith Voss said nothing. What could she say? Detective Sullivan and Monica left. The crowd in the reception hall began to murmur, people turning to each other, whispering. Some looked shocked, some looked sympathetic. Toward me or Christina, I couldn't tell. Some looked like they were trying not to smile. I walked over to where Daniel stood holding Ethan. My grandson was oblivious, chewing on his fist, perfect and innocent. Mum? Daniel said, voice thick. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. Should have done something. You see it now, I said. That's what matters. What you do next is up to you. I kissed Ethan's forehead, nodded to a few friends from church, and walked out of that reception hall with my head high. Helen caught up with me in the parking lot. Dorothy, that was the most savage thing I've ever witnessed. I'm so proud of you I could burst. I laughed, and it felt good. I can't believe I just did that. Believe it. You're a legend. That story is going to be told in Milwaukee for years. The grandma who took down her daughter-in-law at a christening. God, I hope not. I just wanted her to understand. Oh, she understands. Everyone in that room understands. I drove home, made myself a cup of tea, sat in my kitchen, and let myself shake. Because it had taken everything I had to stand in that room and deliver those words without my voice breaking. To watch my son cry. To humiliate Christina in front of her family and friends. But I'd do it again, because some things are worth fighting for. Respect is worth fighting for. Truth is worth fighting for. Teaching your children that actions have consequences is worth fighting for. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Christina's lawyer contacted Monica Park within 24 hours. Christina would meet all the conditions. The written apology arrived 3 days later. 2 pages, handwritten. And to my surprise, it actually seemed genuine. She admitted she'd been careless and entitled, that she'd undervalued me, that she'd let her own insecurities about not coming from Daniel's background turn into contempt. She said she was ashamed and wanted to do better. I didn't know if I believed her, but I accepted the apology. The first restitution check arrived the following week, $267. It would take her a year to pay it all off, just like I'd said. Daniel called me a few days after the christening. Mum, I need to tell you some things. We met for coffee at a diner near my house. He looked exhausted. Christina and I have been in counselling twice already, he said. It's hard. She has a lot of stuff from her childhood, this pressure to be perfect, to perform. And I let her get away with treating you badly because I didn't want to rock the boat. I was scared she'd leave if I stood up to her. And now? Now I realize that's not a marriage. That's hostage negotiation. He smiled, but it was sad. I don't know if we're going to make it, Mum, but we're trying. For Ethan. Try for yourself too, I said. You deserve a partner who respects you. So do you, Mum. God, I'm sorry for how she treated you. I know, and I forgive you, but don't let it happen again. Never, he said fiercely. Never. The FBI's investigation concluded in early November. The brooch was authenticated, catalogued, and prepared for return to Poland. The Polish government invited me to the ceremony in Warsaw, where the piece would be formally restored to the Wawel Castle treasury. I almost didn't go. It was expensive. I'd never been to Europe, The whole thing felt surreal. But then I thought about Zofia, my husband's grandmother, holding that brooch as she boarded a ship in 1928. I thought about Janina, keeping it safe all those years, calling it her lucky piece. I thought about the history it represented, the survival, the resilience, the determination to carry something beautiful through the darkness. So I went. Daniel paid for my ticket, insisted on it. "Mum, you have to go. This is our family history. You have to see it through." The ceremony was in December, in a grand hall in the castle, all stone walls and tapestries and chandeliers. There were Polish government officials, museum curators, historians, journalists. They asked me to say a few words. I stood at the podium, looking out at all those serious faces, and I spoke in English while a translator repeated my words in Polish. "I didn't know what we had," I said. My mother-in-law kept it in a box, called it a lucky charm. She never told me it was valuable, but maybe she didn't know either. Maybe her mother didn't know. Or maybe they knew and decided to keep it secret, keep it safe, until the time was right to let it go home. I like to think they'd be happy it's back where it belongs, that something beautiful that was stolen has been returned. That's its own kind of justice. There was applause. People came up to me afterward, shook my hand, thanked me for my family's stewardship of the piece. A historian told me they'd found records of Zofia's family, minor nobility in Krakow before the war, wiped out during the occupation. The brooch had probably been given to Zofia by someone in the family, a desperate attempt to save at least one precious thing before everything else was destroyed. I cried, standing in that castle, holding the brooch one last time before they locked it in a museum case. I cried for Zofia and Janina and all the women in my family who'd carried this thing through hell and never complained, never asked for recognition, just kept going. When I got home to Milwaukee, I found that the story had spread. A local reporter had written about it. Milwaukee grandmother discovers $6 million brooch, helps return stolen artifact to Poland. Someone posted it on Reddit. It went viral. My phone rang non-stop for weeks. People wanted interviews, wanted to hear the story, wanted to know about Christina. I refused to discuss her publicly. That was a family matter. But the attention died down eventually, as attention always does. Life went back to something like normal. Christina finished paying off the restitution in November of the following year, 2025. She and Daniel were still in counseling. They'd moved out of the expensive condo, bought a modest house in Wauwatosa, closer to where I lived. Christina had taken a step back from her volunteer boards, was working part-time as a fundraising consultant, spending more time with Ethan. She was different with me now. Cautious, respectful, like she was navigating around broken glass. I didn't trust her, not fully, not yet. But I could see she was trying. She asked me about Janina sometimes, about the family history. She apologized again, unprompted, on Thanksgiving. "I see it now," she said quietly, as we washed dishes while the men watched football in the living room. "How I treated you. How I acted like your life didn't matter because it wasn't fancy. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I mean it." I looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged in the past year. There were lines around her eyes, grey roots showing under the blonde. She looked more real, more human. "I believe you," I said, "and I appreciate it. Can I ask you something?" She dried a plate, set it carefully in the cupboard. "How did you know I'd pawned it? How did you figure it out?" I smiled. I snooped, went through your closet like a common thief, found the receipt. She blinked, then laughed, real laughter, not the brittle social laugh I'd heard so many times before. You sneaky old lady. Old, yes, but not to be underestimated. Noted, she said. Believe me, noted. We finished the dishes in companionable silence. Ethan is 3 now, as I'm telling you this story. He calls me babcia, the Polish word for grandmother. He loves when I sing him the old songs, when I tell him stories about his great-great-grandmother who came from a castle. He doesn't understand yet, but someday he will. Someday, I'll take him to Poland, show him the brooch in the museum, tell him about the women who kept it safe. Daniel and Christina are still married. Some days are good, some days are hard. But they're trying, and that's more than a lot of couples can say. As for me, I'm still in my little bungalow, still tending my garden, still having coffee with my church friends. But I'm also doing something new. I've been volunteering at the Milwaukee Art Museum, giving talks about the importance of preserving cultural heritage, about how ordinary people sometimes hold extraordinary pieces of history without knowing it. And I've become something of a legend in the Polish community here. The grandma who took on her daughter-in-law and the FBI and the Polish government and came out standing. People stop me at church, at the grocery store, to tell me their own stories, about difficult in-laws, about standing up for themselves, about finding their voice after years of silence. I tell them what I learned, that respect isn't given, it's earned and demanded. That family means speaking the truth, even when it's hard, that you're never too old to fight for your dignity. And I tell them about Zofia and Janina, about women who survived wars and immigration and widowhood and never got the recognition they deserved, about how we honor them not by being perfect, but by refusing to accept less than we're worth. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where you're from. I read every single one. I still think about that brooch sometimes, the way it caught the light after they cleaned it, the way it felt in my palm, heavier than it looked, the weight of history. But I also think about standing in that church hall, with my son and my grandson and 80 witnesses, and saying out loud what I'd been thinking for 3 years, the weight of truth. Both kinds of weight are hard to carry, but when you finally set them down in the right place, the relief is extraordinary. Remember that. Whatever you're carrying that doesn't belong to you, whether it's a stolen brooch or someone else's disrespect, you have the power to put it down. You have the power to say, this ends now. You're stronger than you think, and you're worth fighting for. Right.